Hey everybody, welcome back. My name is Elise, and this is 10 to Life, where we talk everything true crime. So if you are brand new and checking out the channel for the first time, welcome. I hope you enjoy today's case coverage. And if you are a returning 10 to Lifer, welcome back. I love when you guys come back. I love when you let me know that you've been here for since the TikTok days before I even had a YouTube. So welcome back. Before we jump into today's video, don't forget to do that thing, support the channel, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't done so already, copy the link, throw it in your group chat with your girls, send it out, spread the word, and do what you do. All right, so the case we are talking about today is one, God guys, it's literally all too familiar. It's one where you feel like it shouldn't be happening, but unfortunately it is, and you hear it so many times, so I'm not even going to give the spiel because you know it all too well, but let me just tell you what we're going to be talking about today. 10 Mile is a small town located in a county in Tennessee, and the community is known for its beautiful outdoor recreational activities. Primarily, their high-end marinas, their resorts, nicely kept campgrounds, as well as locally owned restaurants and boutiques. All of this surrounds the town's central hub, Watts Bar Lake. Many people own summer lake houses in 10 Mile, and the locals are said to be very friendly and consider their town a great place to live. While there are upscale homes, there is also a mix of more rural towns. I can't ever say that word. Rural. Sorry, guys. And what you might consider country homes too. From the outside of these quaint houses, you might expect happy, everyday suburban families. But as we all know, what goes on behind closed doors is often beyond the realm of our imagination. When you think of a family who adopts 5 foster children, you usually would think of selfless people who must have big hearts and tons of love to give, and hopefully a warm and safe home for these kids. Children in the foster care system hopefully end up in circumstances better than they came from originally. I mean, that's at least the goal, right? Well, unfortunately, for the adopted children behind the doors of one home in 10 Mile, Tennessee, that was not the case. Not by a long shot. So let's get right into it.
10 to Life with Elise starts right now.
We are going to take a quick break in today's case to have a word from our sponsor. Truebill is an all-in-one personal finance platform that helps you save more and spend less. With Truebill, you can find and cancel unwanted subscriptions, lower your bills, monitor your credit score, and build your savings all in one place. Now, let me just tell you, this has been an absolute game changer for me. And you've heard me talk about it before, guys, but I'm talking about it again because I cannot tell you how many unwanted or forgotten subscriptions I have somehow managed to just collect over the years. I sign up and I forget about it, yet I'm still paying for it. And I usually forget because they are for, a relatively small amount, so they go unnoticed. But when you add them up, that is a lot of money every year that is just going out the window. So Truebill has really helped me get a handle on all of those, so I actually know and, more importantly, use the subscriptions that I have. Truebill safely and securely identifies the reoccurring charges and then cancels the unwanted subscriptions for you with seriously just a tap. It is that easy. And in addition to all of that, as if that isn't enough, they help me set budgets that automatically monitor my spending by category and send me friendly little notifications anytime I've exceeded that budget, which is luckily getting less and less. And if you're like me, you are a visual person. I need to see things to really understand them. And with this, you're able to visualize your spend to earn ratio by month, quarter, or year, however you want to slice it. To try it out for free and to unlock even more features with premium, head to truebill.com/10tolife or click on the link in my video description box below. Guys, it has been a game changer for me, and we can all right now, I think, do whatever possible to help our finances. Inflation is on the rise, things are crazy out there, so anywhere where we can do, a little bit of monitoring and a little bit of safeguarding, I say, all the better. So check out Truebill for yourself and tell me what you guys think. Click that link in the description box below and try it out for free. Thank you, Truebill, for sponsoring today's video, for helping my day-to-day wallet. I thank you, my husband thanks you. My whole entire world thanks you. And thank you to all of you viewers for understanding that sponsors are essential to the channel if we want to grow it to a place where I can deliver you more true crime all the time. Now let's jump back into today's case. It was a cloudy and rainy Friday on May 22nd, 2020 in 10 Mile, Tennessee. A car driving down a country road called Dry Fork Valley passed a little boy who was alone on the side of the road. The boy looked very young, too young to be out by himself, especially in the rain, and he reportedly looked somewhat dazed and confused. Dry Fork Valley Road wasn't in a subdivision with sidewalks or anything like that. It was in a somewhat rural area, and the houses are few and far between. So this concerned driver stopped to ask if the boy was okay and learned that he didn't know where he was or where his parents were. I mean, thank God this driver wasn't a creep and decided to call 911 so that the boy could get help finding his way back home and finding his parents, because this could have ended disastrously if it were, some creep on the road who stumbled upon this boy. When officers arrived, they spoke with the boy and found out that he was actually 8 years old, even though he looked much younger than that, which is why this driver was so concerned at first. Not that 8-year-olds should be out alone either on the side of the road, but he just seemed so much smaller. They were able to question him and backtrack with the boy and ultimately find out where he'd come from, which was only a short distance away on the same street. Now, how was this little boy so confused if he was just down the street from his house? Surely he had been outside playing before, maybe riding a bike or a scooter, and would know his way back home from just down the street, right? When a child gets picked up by the police, it's routine for them to call a DCFS to reunite the family, ask why the child was out alone, or offer resources just to make sure that everything's okay. It doesn't necessarily mean that anybody is in trouble. They're just there to be an advocate for the child and make sure that all is well before then being on their way. So when they knocked on the door, parents Michael and Shirley Gray were shocked to see their son outside and didn't know that he had left the house, let alone how long he had been gone. Police and DCFS asked if they could come inside and talk to Michael and Shirley. When they stepped inside, they quickly realized that this was not going to be a routine parent and child reunion. Michael Gray, age 65, and his wife Shirley, age 62, got married in 1981 and had 7 children together, 2 biological and 5 adopted. They had their first child, Carolyn, who goes by her middle name Agatha, and their second child, Michael Anthony Jr., who goes by Anthony, and they had them in the early 80s. Agatha is currently 42, and Anthony is 40. In the mid to late 1990s, the Grays lived in Florida and then Mississippi, where they experienced some financial hardships and had to file Chapter 7 bankruptcy. After this, they moved to Tennessee and lived in several different counties before settling in their first long-term home at 6416 Cedar Breeze Road, located near Hall's Crossroads. The locals refer to this area as Halls, and it is in Knox County, Tennessee. Even though the family lived in a beautiful 2-story home with a brick facade, Michael and Shirley had to file Chapter 7 bankruptcy yet again in 1996. By 2007, Anthony and Agatha, who were then in their late 20s, moved out on their own. The empty nesters must have gotten their finances somewhat in order because this is when they started to adopt children. Or did they adopt the children because their finances were in trouble and they needed the money? It's not clear how old the children were when each of them were adopted, but between 2007 and 2011, the Grays had adopted 2 girls, Sophie and Brandy, and 3 boys, Jonathan, Ryan, and Toby. During this time, Agatha had started her own family and had at least 1 daughter and 2 sons that we now know of. At some point, Anthony moved back into the Cedar Breeze home with his partner Travis and is reported to have lived upstairs while the older Grays and their adopted children lived downstairs. It said that Michael and Shirley and all 5 of their adopted children lived in the basement of that home. Agatha and her family would end up moving back into the Gray house for short periods of time here and there as well. It seemed almost like that home was not the bunker, I don't know why I'm thinking that, but almost just kind of like the touch point for everybody. They would come and go as they pleased. They would move back in when they were struggling. Some family members lived upstairs while the bulk of the family lived downstairs in the basement. Just seems, I don't know, a little odd. The adopted Gray children were enrolled in homeschool, and documents said that they were being taught by their mother, Shirley. So while the Grays still had some troubles with their financial situation, like credit card debt and unpaid bills, they were starting to get help from the state through the assistance that is given to families of adopted children. In 2016, Michael and Shirley decided that they were going to move yet again. Their oldest son, Anthony, became the owner of this home now on Cedar Breeze. So Anthony and his partner, Travis, stayed living there together, and the Gray parents, along with the adopted children, moved from Halls to a home at 1472 Dry Fork Road in 10 Mile. This is the home that police brought the little boy back to that Friday in May of 2020. As soon as police and DCFS stepped inside the Gray home, they were smacked in the face with a strong smell of urine and a garbage-like scent. The police, feeling like something wasn't right, asked if the Grays would come to the DCFS office and be interviewed about what happened with their son earlier and how he was out alone with nobody knowing. And at some point, their older son, Anthony, showed up and briefly spoke to his father before the parents then agreed to go. So together with their son, Toby, and their daughter, Brandy, who was around 12 years old at the time, went to the office. When Toby was being interviewed, he told officers that one of his brothers was in the basement at their house. Michael Gray must have known that DCFS would be able to pull up his family adoption records because almost immediately he admitted to there being a child in the basement and also that another child was buried in the backyard. Officers took Michael back to his home where he consented to a search, and they were able to make contact with a 15-year-old boy in the basement by the name of Ryan Gray. Now, this information I'm going to share now is based on the affidavits, the statements made from the officers and the judges on this case, as well as details that the children gave in their interviews. Surprisingly, much of the information has come from Michael and Shirley themselves, who, upon being arrested, waived their right to remain silent and just started spilling the sick and twisted details about what they had done to their children. Some of the information could be triggering for some people, and it is very unsettling learning what these children have endured. Like I said earlier, the officer said that when they entered the Gray home, there was an extremely strong scent of garbage and urine. There was also visible animal and human urine and feces throughout the home, on beds, on concrete, on flooring, and even looking further, they found a small concrete room under a flight of stairs. Michael admitted to this being the punishment room for his kids. The only things inside the 3 by 4 foot room were a bucket filled with human waste and magazine pages that had been used for wiping. There was excrement caked on the walls, and Michael said that he had built that room specifically for punishment purposes, and it had recently been used to punish 2 of the children. Disgusting. Awful. Not okay. When making their way to the basement, there was a clear odor of mold, and they discovered that it was actually partially flooded. In the flooded area of the basement, there was floating trash and even sewage. In the area that was not flooded, a small wire dog cage could be seen. And Michael, again, admitted to putting the children in there from time to time as a form of punishment. There were also exposed wires, which is obviously extremely dangerous in general, and even more since the basement was partially filled with water. And he told officers that 15-year-old Ryan had been in the basement since 2016, shortly after the family moved in, and he says that it was because he had tried to steal some fruit from the refrigerator. I'm sorry, so you punish your son, your young son, for trying to take some fruit from the refrigerator for 4 years, and you put him in there for 4 years. Like, something can't, in my opinion, something just isn't right in the head there with Michael, because not only are they doing this to their children, but he's just willfully admitting this to police. It's crazy. The children were apparently primarily punished for stealing food and were only given bread and water. It's also been noted that all of the children's growth has been visibly stunted, which is from a lack of nutrition and possibly even from being confined to small spaces. The police officers were the first adults other than their parents that the children had spoken to in 4 years. The next day on Saturday, May 23rd, an excavation began to search for the girl who supposedly was buried in the backyard and what is being called a pole barn. And pretty much a pole barn is a structure which can be used as a small shed or as a large actual barn, but it just has these side panels, usually made of steel or aluminum, and there's just no foundation, meaning it's just on dirt and it's on the floor. The Grays told the officer that the little girl, identified as Heather Josephine Gray, who also went by Sophie, was also being punished for stealing food and had been kept in the basement for months, only getting white bread and water. She passed away in early 2017. Her cause of death has not been released and may not actually be released because she was completely skeletonized. But I think there are various different ways that this little girl could have died in that basement. I mean, she could have practically starved from malnutrition. She could have gotten some kind of infection from being in literal sewage and damp and moldy conditions for so long, or possibly even the exposed wiring had something to do with it. I mean, unfortunately here, the options are endless. And in another just heartbreaking detail, it said that the basement didn't have its own electricity, which means that it was probably dark all the time and freezing in the winter time. Most of us can imagine what a basement must be like with no windows and no source of light. But just imagine those children down there for months, and in the boys' case, years, sloshing around in that filth and sewage, starving, being scared of the dark, being cold, and just absolutely freezing, because even though Tennessee is in the south, the winters get really cold down there. It's gut-wrenching to think about, and you can't even imagine doing this to a child. Michael casually tossed in yet another piece of information, that they kept her in a cardboard box for a while before they got around to digging the hole in the barn. There were bodies of dead animals in the pole barn as well, like goats, chickens, and I think even a pig, which literally just makes me sick to my stomach. They literally put their daughter's remains just disposed in a barn alongside dead animals. Awful. On Monday, May 25th, surviving children, Ryan, Toby, and Brandy, were placed into foster care. Thank God, get them away from these parents. And the next day, Michael and Shirley were arraigned, and their bond was set at $500,000 each, which in my opinion, they shouldn't have even qualified for bond, but that was about to change anyway, so it doesn't matter. But like in situations like this, I think there should absolutely never be bond allowed. So if you were keeping track, the Gray family had adopted 5 children. One girl was buried in the barn, one boy was stuck in the basement for years, and then there was that little girl and the little boy who was found initially. So where was the 5th child? The remaining children told officers that one day their brother got sick and went away and never came back. On Wednesday, May 27th, police went to the Grays' former residence, the current residence of their oldest son, Anthony, and his partner, Travis. They cooperated with police and allowed them to search their home. And over the course of 3 days, tons of evidence was taken out, including computers, Xboxes, iPhones, bags, boxes, and even drywall. And finally, the skeleton of another little boy was found buried in the backyard, and this boy was identified as Jonathan Gray. He is said to have died between 2015 and 2016, before his parents moved to their new home in 10 Mile. Even though Anthony denied knowing anything about the deaths of his siblings or the things that were taking place, evidence has painted a much different picture. Statements from the surviving children have indicated that their older brother was aware of what their parents were doing to them, and it didn't just stop at starving them or locking them away in small rooms. They also said that there was forms of hurting them physically. Phone records, text messages, and financial documents have been gathered, and there were conversations between Anthony and his parents asking if he should actually claim the deceased children as dependents on his taxes. Like, as if this isn't enough, you're now trying to claim them as dependents on your taxes to get a break and get some money? Like, what? Oh, God, these people make me sick. He asked them if he should report them on the census because he didn't know that if that information was then shared with the IRS. So clearly Anthony did know that those siblings were dead. The police have also testified that the basement of his home was left the way it was when the family was living in the basement. There was still feces, clear signs of children being locked up due to the locks on the outside of the door. So he's trying to say that in the 4 years that the basement was empty since they had moved, he never went down there and saw the conditions that his siblings were living in. I highly doubt it. He was quickly arrested and charged in connection with the death of Jonathan, who was found in the yard of his home, as well as some other charges that we'll get to here in a little bit. And as you can probably guess with all of this, the children weren't really being homeschooled. They were all enrolled in that homeschool program, and Shirley had went as far as falsifying homeschool work and documents for years to make it look as though the children were completing their courses and doing well, really just trying to trick the system. And I feel like that is so much effort that it might actually have been less work just to teach the kids. I don't know. There's a thought, and have them do the work. Not only were they claiming the children for homeschooling, but they were claiming them on the tax documents, and then they were also collecting the families of adopted children assistance money this entire time for all 5 children, even the 2 deceased. Officials have said that it's likely that they were receiving more than $45,000 a year in adoption assistance alone. In Tennessee, the adoption subsidy can range from $25 to $60 per day per child, depending on the situation and the kind of support that the child will need and things like that. So at the absolute lowest, they would have been getting almost $46,000 a year. But that's if they were getting just the $25 a day. If they were getting something more like $40 a day, it would be $73,000 a year. And I think this right here, in my opinion, solidifies that they did not adopt these children to fill the void of as being empty nesters or because they had so much love in their hearts. It's because they had filed Chapter 7 bankruptcy twice, they were still having financial hardships and credit card debt, and they needed money. So they saw each and every one of these kids as their personal paycheck. The judge has upped the bond from Shirley and Michael to $1 million after the discovery of Jonathan's body in their old house. And they are being tried together and are facing 4 counts of felony first-degree murder, 8 counts of physically hurting the children, 8 counts of neglecting the children, 9 counts of kidnapping, 6 counts of especially aggravated kidnapping, which I didn't even know that's a thing, 5 counts of falsifying educational or academic records, and 1 count of theft of property, and 1 count of messing with a corpse. At first, Anthony was supposed to be tried with his parents, but his attorneys argued that he should be tried separately because the prosecution is seeking the death penalty for Michael and Shirley if they are convicted of the first-degree murder charges. After consideration, the judge has now given him a separate trial so that Michael and Shirley can actually be called as witnesses in their son's case. Anthony has been charged with felony murder, hurting a child neglect, messing with a corpse, and also falsifying documents. As of right now, Michael, Shirley, and Anthony have pled not guilty to all of those charges. A status hearing is set for September 30th, 2022, and Anthony's trial date is set for February 13th, 2023. But his parents' trial has not yet been set in stone because Michael is now asking for a change of venue due to the publicity of this case. He said that he won't get a fair trial if he and his wife are tried in their own county. But give me a break. So that's where we are right now with this case, and I just have so many questions like I'm sure you guys do. First of all, what is in the water with all of these parents coming out, having secret kids, building these like dungeon-like rooms, keeping their children in just like deplorable conditions, starving them, not sending them to school, and just like, what's the point of having them? I get it. You're answering right now, I'm sure, as you're watching this saying, for money, duh. But it's like, I mean, come on. It's like, it's deja vu from the Turpin case, from the Zoe McHugh case that I covered just a few weeks ago where the children were kept in locked rooms and didn't even have running water and had the buckets. It's similar to the case that's coming out of Jupiter, Florida, where they locked I believe he was adopted too, their adopted son in a room for years and years and years. And again, as I mentioned, the Turpin family. I can think off the top of my head at least 5 different families that come to mind and are well-known cases that I haven't even covered yet that have very similar details. I just don't understand how it's possible, especially with children who came from the foster system. I suppose I can see if a family isolates themselves and has babies that are undocumented and have never been to a doctor or anything like that, although irresponsible, I can kind of see where logistically that makes sense. But all of these children came from the system that is supposed to prevent this from happening. So where is the follow-up here? And I was reading that in Tennessee, once an adoption is final, the state is under no obligation to check in on them unless there are allegations of something happening in the home. So there just has to be something done about this because, I mean, honestly, how many more kids have to die before there will be a law that says if you are receiving money from the state, adoption assistance, whatever it is, there has to be physical proof that the child is alive at the very, very least. I mean, Shirley went as far as faking all of these homeschooling documents. Not just the fact that they were in homeschool, but faking their testing, their homework, whatever it was, like all of these things to prove that they were doing well and thriving. If that kind of documentation is required just to show proof of education, why is there not more documentation required or a well check required to show that the child is even breathing? Something here feels very off-balanced to me, whether it's an updated photo ID or a medical record document or something. But I think, like, how can you receive money from this state and not have to actually prove that you are deserving of that money and that you are earning that money by taking care of these children? The Gray children hadn't been to the doctor at all after being adopted. I would also like to know how a family with so many financial issues and who filed bankruptcy twice was able to adopt 5 children. I understand most families have some sort of financial struggles. I'm not trying to make light of that, especially in today's world. But that doesn't mean that they can't provide a happy and loving home, and usually there are a lot of financial requirements to prove adoption. I know, at least if you're trying to adopt soloy, that's not a word. If you're trying to adopt on your own, you have to prove that you, of course, have a certain amount of income and that you can take care of the child. So I'm not understanding what's happening here. And if you don't have money, it doesn't mean that they can't provide a happy and loving home. It doesn't mean that at all. But if there is a pattern of a couple not being able to get out of debt or keep themselves afloat, then why would they be allowed to adopt 5 kids? Maybe 1 child, maybe even 2, but most people would struggle caring financially for 2 kids, even 5 kids, especially people who have already been through bankruptcy twice. It's almost as if DCFS or the adoption agencies are just so desperate to get these kids placed and in homes that they will overlook a lot of potential red flags. It's like they figure that the family will get money from the state for the kids. The kids will be out of their hair. There won't be any problems. Everybody will live happily ever after. But that's not the case. Why would they allow a family who is living in a basement with only 1 bedroom put 5 more kids down there? Don't they deserve at least a bedroom, even if you're sharing the bedroom? And I also wonder if the adoption agency went to check on their home before allowing them to adopt all of these kids. I also recently read an article about how in Tennessee, 2/3 of families who receive adoption assistance payments have not turned in their required documentation. By law, families who get assistance have to prove that their child is in school. They have to have verification of medical records, and they have to have seen a doctor in the past year. In 2022, only 7,000 out of almost 12,000 adopted children have had their documentation turned in. That is crazy. That means there are 4,000 children just in this past year that have not had their documentation turned in. And that is, again, only documentation for families who get assistance in Tennessee. Now, if that 4,000 number is just for Tennessee, think about how many there are in the entire United States. How many children have incomplete documentation, and where are they? I'm sure there are way more families who have adopted children and don't receive assistance and are just flying completely under the radar, whether it's to adopt the child and then possibly trade them or sell them. I don't even know, guys. It's just absolutely unacceptable. When you look at these numbers, you can see why DCFS is spread so thin and why so many kids really do fall through the cracks. That is thousands of home visits that they would have to do to check on these kids who have been adopted, which is also why it's so important that these mandatory documents actually be enforced. If they don't turn in the paperwork, don't give them money. If they don't turn in the paperwork, go knock on their door, do a visit. Someone has to make sure that these kids are okay. There needs to be some sort of checkpoint in place here. And here is what Tennessee has said that they plan to do.
Now to a live look at the floor of the State House in Nashville. We'll be taking a look at that soon. In just a few minutes, lawmakers are scheduled to vote on a bill drafted after a horrific child case in East Tennessee.
The bill will give the Department of Children's Services more oversight after prosecutors say a Roane County couple made thousands of dollars while abusing the kids they were paid to adopt. Sponsors of the bill have a simple goal: never allow a similar case to happen again. And 10 News reporter Cole Sullivan looks at the bill and the ongoing efforts of local groups to save children from abuse.
It's the second to last hurdle for a bill born out of an East Tennessee tragedy.
Michael, do you have anything to say?
Prosecutors charged Michael Gray and his wife Shirley with cashing thousands of dollars in payments for kids investigators say they locked in the basement, starved, and killed. The bill gives DCS the power to keep closer tabs on families who receive adoption assistance payments to make sure the kids are okay.
DCS is a huge referral source.
Sarah Long works with victims of the McNabb Center.
I think that kids can overcome the effects of trauma. They can heal and get better.
The center offers treatment options for victims, but also prevention tools for families before something horrible happens.
Stranger danger is something that we equip families with, that type of knowledge, but the majority of children who experience neglect actually are abused by somebody that they know. Even young kids can tell us that something's wrong. Usually we can tell through the kids' behaviors, and so kids might start to seem more withdrawn or they might start acting out.
An upcoming law change will give more oversight for a problem only community and family awareness can stop.
The next thing I would like to know is why in the world aren't Agatha and Travis being charged with anything? If Anthony knew enough about what was going on to be charged with murder as well, then there is absolutely no way his partner Travis knew absolutely nothing. There's no way that he was completely oblivious to 5 starving children, never going to school, being physically hurt, being neglected, and then 1 actually dying. How could he not have known that a body was buried in the backyard of the home that he's now been living in for years? And it was said that Jonathan was buried pretty much right out of the back door, not even far away from the property at all. In this photo, you can see where the pole barn is that Sophie was buried in relation to the house. It almost seems as though they took more of a strategic approach and effort with her burial than they did Jonathan, and that his burial might have just kind of been like, a hasty decision, considering they then moved very soon after that. And then there's Agatha, who was in and out with her kids when they needed a place to stay. In and out of the home. Remember, what did I call it? I called it a hub, or I called it something weird. I don't even know. And in her photos, all of her children look happy, healthy, and well-fed. So how is it that she had no clue her siblings were going through what they were going through? She wasn't concerned when 2 of her siblings were just gone with no explanation. She didn't find it weird that none of her siblings were ever let outside, not at school, not growing up at the property, because of their growth that was stunted from the malnutrition. The photos of her being all smiley and her children looking like they don't have a care in the world, which they shouldn't, by the way, it's just such a drastic juxtaposition to the life that her siblings were living. At the exact same time, at similar times, under the same roof. Imagine seeing your cousins eating, going to school, playing sports, and just being loved in general, and then being treated like the way that the Gray children were treated. It's so confusing and heartbreaking, and I really just don't understand why charges weren't brought against them for at least knowing about what was going on. It seems to me that Michael and Shirley Gray didn't know how to manage their money at all, and thought that adopting kids would be an easy way to collect a government check, and that was the answer. And I really wonder what they were using that money for, because it wasn't for food for their kids. It wasn't to make their home nice and clean or not smell like mold or flooded or whatever. Their entire home was literally covered with urine, with feces, with junk, with sewage. I mean, what were you using the money for? And then when you look at Shirley, she seems well kept and normal. And why would Shirley go through so much trouble to act like the children were in school? Why not just send the kids to public school if you don't want to teach them? And I'm guessing that a lot of this is not only because they wanted the paycheck, but I believe that they truly did not care at all about these kids. Not a stitch from day one. I think that's why she didn't enroll them in school, even public school. I think that's why they weren't well fed. I think that's why all of this happened, because I think there wasn't a bone in their body that had any sort of compassion or care for any of these kids. I don't think there was a stitch of it. Not at all. Not from the beginning all the way to the end when they got caught. I don't even think they adopted them intentionally thinking they were going to love them. I think the entire time it was for a paycheck. And there are so many whys that I'm sure we will never get the answer to. Why not feed your kids? Why not give them a clean home? Why not give them clean beds to sleep in? Why not take them to the doctor? Why not let them see the light of day? Why treat the ones who died from what you put them through like trash and not give them a proper burial? And once again, so many neighbors are saying, and we hear this and it infuriates me, we hear it all the time, I had no idea. I had no idea that something was going on. They looked so normal. Things looked so great. But come to think of it, I never saw the children outside. Come to think of it, I never saw them playing. Come to think of it, the blinds were always shut. Hello? What do you mean you had no idea? Clearly you had some sort of idea that something was weird. Come to think of it. And I'm going to just say it again, which apparently has become my new motto on this channel. If you see something, you have to say something, especially when it comes to kids. If you know that there are supposed to be kids in a house and you never see them, knock on the door and check on your neighbors or call someone to do it. It's really not that hard, and it can literally save lives. In all of these cases, kids are the ones who save their own lives. The Turpins had Jordan, who was brave and jumped out of the window and called police. The McHugh's son lit their entire house on fire to escape. And then this little boy escaped too and somehow made it down the street, probably just wanting to get away. The children are the ones who have saved their own lives here, not any adults. And that should speak volumes to all of us. It is not the children's job to save themselves, and I really do hope that Anthony gets the maximum penalty for knowing what was happening to his siblings and benefiting financially off of them as well. What kind of sick, deranged a-hole claims their dead siblings as dependents? I'm not really sure how Shirley and Michael are pleading not guilty, considering that they pretty much also confessed to everything they did. They are going to go with an insanity plea, and I wouldn't doubt it. It really just doesn't make any sense to just collect all of these kids and then hurt them for no reason other than you want the check. But then to still keep your house in these squalor, disgusting conditions. It is bizarre. If you're getting all of that money every year, why do you want the money? Is it for a nice house? Is it for nice things? Why do you want that money, and where is it being spent? Because clearly we can't see anything where it's been spent. So if you have any explanation as for why you think they would do this or how they are pleading not guilty, please let me know in the comments below. I can't think of any other defense besides insanity that would get them off of these charges, or at least to take the death penalty off of the table. There is just so much evidence, and thank God that there are 3 surviving strong children who have started to tell their story. In the courtroom, it was said that when the children were placed into their foster homes, they were all mesmerized by a refrigerator. Can you imagine? It is just so sad, and it hurts my heart to think of people being able to treat children this way, especially children that they are supposed to love who already are coming from very tough conditions and circumstances. The Grays took on the responsibility to care for and love these kids willingly. It's not like these kids were accidents. They went out of their way to adopt them and then went out of their way to hurt them. Just like in the Zoe McHugh case, I'm praying that these children are now in a safe and loving foster home and can finally receive the love and the security and the meals and everything that they deserve. And I think we can all hope that Shirley, Michael, and Anthony get what they deserve as well. And if Agatha and Travis don't end up being charged, they are the ones who will have to live with not doing or saying anything to help these kids. Not that that burden seems to weigh heavily on them as it stands, but you know what? Karma can be a real bitch. So we're just going to have to let it do its job here. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. I'm going to be following this trial very closely. I'm going to be following all of the new updates very closely. So of course, subscribe so you can check back for those updates. But I want to know what you guys think. Not only the why, as to why they do this, because I do know absolutely it's motivated by money, but also if they were getting between 45 to 75 grand a year, where did that money go? It didn't go to fancy things. It didn't go to a clean house. Where did it go? And they had credit card debt, so maybe they were just spenders or hoarders. I don't even know. I just have so many questions. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. And also if you have any suggestions as to how we can somehow maybe implement something in the future to prevent this. Should there be a wellness check required if documentation isn't submitted? It seems like such a no-brainer. It just blows my mind. So again, you guys always have such great feedback and such great ideas. So please let's get the conversation going in the comments below. Thanks so much for tuning in with me today, guys. I hope you enjoyed the case coverage. Please don't forget to like this video, comment, share it where you can. It helps generate awareness and spread these awful, awful situations so that at least people can be more mindful and aware if they see something like this happening with a neighbor or with a schoolmate or something like that. So share this video where you can too, guys. All right, thanks again, and until the next case, stay safe. Bye.